My husband Henderson vanished during our 8-year-old daughter's funeral, leaving only a vague excuse about a family emergency. But his location tracker revealed he was at a luxury spa resort 200 miles away, and he had no idea I could see exactly where he was, or what I was about to do with that information. The morning of Rosalie's funeral dawned gray and cold, matching the emptiness that had consumed my soul for the past week. My beautiful 8-year-old daughter, my sunshine, my reason for breathing was gone. Leukemia had taken her despite 2 years of grueling treatments, endless hospital stays, and prayers that seemed to echo into an uncaring void. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, struggling with the zipper of my black dress. My hands trembled, not just from grief, but from exhaustion. The past months had been a blur of medical appointments, insurance calls, and sleepless nights holding Rosalie's fragile hand as she fought a battle no child should ever face. "Abigail, are you almost ready?" Henderson's voice called from downstairs, but something in his tone felt distant, distracted. Not the voice of a father preparing to bury his daughter. I took a shaky breath and made my way down the stairs. Henderson stood by the kitchen counter, immaculately dressed in his charcoal suit, but his attention was fixed on his phone screen. He was typing rapidly, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Who are you texting?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. He looked up, startled as if he'd forgotten I was there. "Oh, just work stuff. You know how it is. The Peterson merger won't wait, even for—" He gestured vaguely, unable to say the words, "Our daughter's funeral." "Even for what, Henderson? Even for the day we lay our baby to rest?" During Rosalie's illness, Henderson had thrown himself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. While I practically lived at the hospital, he claimed urgent business trips, important client meetings, deals that couldn't wait. I had begged him to take time off, to be present for the final weeks, but he always had an excuse. "The medical bills won't pay themselves, Abigail," he'd say. "Someone has to keep earning." But as I watched him now, scrolling through his phone with practiced indifference, a cold realization crept through my chest. This wasn't about work. This was about escape. We drove to the funeral home in silence. Henderson's jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the road ahead as if he were driving to a business meeting rather than our daughter's funeral. I stared out the passenger window, watching suburban houses blur past, each one filled with families who still had their children. The funeral home was filled with mourners, friends, family, neighbors, Rosalie's teachers from school, everyone who had loved my bright, funny, impossibly brave little girl. I moved through the receiving line like a ghost, accepting condolences and hugs that felt like they were happening to someone else. "She was such a special child," whispered Mrs. Patterson, Rosalie's second-grade teacher. "Always helping other kids, always smiling even when she was tired from treatments." "Thank you," I managed, my voice cracking. "She loved your class." I looked around for Henderson, expecting to find him beside me, sharing in these precious memories of our daughter. Instead, I spotted him near the back of the room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. During the service, as the pastor spoke about Rosalie's courage and the joy she'd brought to everyone who knew her, Henderson's phone buzzed repeatedly. Each vibration felt like a small betrayal. Who could be so important that they couldn't wait until after we buried our child? "Rosalie touched everyone she met," the pastor was saying. Even in her final days, she was thinking of others, asking her mother to donate her favorite books to other sick children at the hospital. I squeezed my eyes shut, remembering that conversation. Rosalie, weak and pale but still thinking of others, had made me promise to give away her beloved collection of fairy tale books, so other kids won't be scared in the hospital, Mommy. Books make everything better. When I opened my eyes, Henderson's seat beside me was empty. I scanned the room frantically, my heart pounding. Where was he? This was our daughter's funeral. The most important day, the worst day of our lives. And he had simply vanished. After the service, as mourners filed past Rosalie's small white casket, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. It was my sister Alice, her eyes red with tears. "Where's Henderson?" she asked softly. I don't know," I admitted, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "He was here a minute ago." Alice's expression hardened. Throughout Rosalie's illness, she had been my rock, often filling the emotional space that Henderson's absence had created. She had never said anything directly, but I could see the judgment in her eyes when Henderson missed important appointments or showed up late to the hospital. "I'll help you look for him," she said, but we both knew it was pointless. Henderson was gone. The burial was a blur of grief and humiliation. Family members whispered among themselves, glancing at the empty space where Henderson should have been standing. I felt exposed, abandoned in the most public way possible. My daughter's grandmother, Henderson's own mother, looked mortified. "I'm sure there's an explanation," she said weakly, but her eyes couldn't meet mine. After the cemetery, back at our house, the mourners gathered for the reception. Our dining room table was covered with casseroles and sympathy cards, but I couldn't eat, couldn't focus on the conversations swirling around me. All I could think about was Henderson's empty chair, his missing presence at our daughter's final goodbye. That's when I remembered the family location app on my phone. Henderson had insisted we install it months ago, claiming it was for safety reasons. "What if something happens to Rosalie at the hospital and we need to find each other quickly?" he'd said. At the time, it had seemed practical, caring even. With shaking fingers, I opened the app. Henderson's location popped up immediately. Serenity Springs Resort and Spa, 200 miles north. My blood turned to ice, a luxury resort. While I had just buried our daughter, while family and friends gathered to mourn and remember Rosalie, Henderson was at a spa. I stared at the screen, certain it had to be a mistake. But there it was, his phone's GPS signal, clear as day, placing him at a 5-star resort known for its couples retreats and romantic weekend packages. "Abigail, honey, are you all right?" Alice appeared beside me, concern etched across her face. Turned the phone screen toward her, unable to speak. Her face went white, then red with fury. "That bastard," she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "At a resort? Today?" The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just neglect or poor timing. This was deliberate. Henderson had planned this. While I was saying goodbye to our daughter, he was somewhere else entirely, living a completely different life. But as I sat there, surrounded by mourners eating casseroles and sharing memories of Rosalie, a strange calm settled over me. Henderson thought he was being clever. He thought his location was secret, his escape plan foolproof. He had no idea that I could see exactly where he was, and he had no idea what I was going to do with that information. The house felt suffocating after the last mourner left. Alice had offered to stay, but I needed to be alone with this devastating discovery. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at Henderson's location on my phone screen, watching the little blue dot that represented my husband's betrayal. Serenity Springs, Resort and Spa. I pulled up their website on my laptop, my hands shaking as I scrolled through images of couples enjoying massages, romantic dinners, and infinity pools overlooking mountain vistas. Their tagline read, "Escape to Paradise, where love finds renewal." While I had been planning our daughter's funeral, Henderson had been planning his escape to paradise. I clicked through the resort's amenities: a world-class spa, couples therapy sessions, private cabanas, and something called relationship renewal packages. The irony was so brutal it made me laugh. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A harsh, bitter sound that echoed through my empty house. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe Henderson was finally reaching out, finally ready to explain his unforgivable absence. The message was from him, but it wasn't what I expected. Had to handle family emergency. Flying back tomorrow evening. Sorry I couldn't make it to the service. Give my love to everyone. Family emergency. Flying back. The lies came so easily to him, so naturally. He wasn't flying anywhere. He was 200 miles away at a luxury resort, probably getting a couple's massage while I had just buried our child. The location tracker showed he had been there since yesterday morning, which meant he had left for his family emergency the day before Rosalie's funeral. I screenshotted his text and his location, my legal mind automatically preserving evidence. As a paralegal, I knew the value of documentation, though I had never imagined I'd be building a case against my own husband. My phone rang, startling me. It was my mother. "Abigail, sweetheart, I'm so worried about you. Where did Henderson go? Alice told me he just disappeared." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of explaining this humiliation to yet another person. He said there was a family emergency, Mom. He had to leave. A family emergency? What kind of emergency could be more important than his daughter's funeral? Her voice was sharp with disbelief. I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Not until I figured out exactly what Henderson was doing and why. "I don't know, Mom. I'm trying to reach him." After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, the only light coming from my laptop screen. I started researching Serenity Springs more thoroughly, looking at their booking policies, their room rates, their packages. Everything was expensive, the kind of luxury that required planning and significant money. Room rates started at $400 per night. Couples packages ranged from $800 to $2,000 per day. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a last-minute business trip. This was a planned getaway that would have cost thousands of dollars we didn't have. For the past 2 years, every penny had gone toward Rosalie's medical care. I had been clipping coupons, buying generic groceries, and postponing my own medical and dental appointments to save money. Henderson claimed his income was being stretched thin by the medical bills, that we had to be careful with every expense. Yet somehow, he had money for a luxury resort vacation. I logged into our online banking, something I rarely did since Henderson handled most of our finances. What I found made my stomach drop. Over the past 6 months, there had been regular withdrawals from our savings account. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $300 there, but gradually increasing. The most recent withdrawal, made 3 days ago, was for $1,500. The timing was perfect, right after we had received Rosalie's final medical bills and right before her funeral. Henderson had been systematically draining our savings while I was focused on caring for our dying daughter. I dug deeper into our financial records, my paralegal training kicking in as I traced the money trail. Henderson's credit card statements showed purchases I didn't recognize. Expensive dinners for two, hotel rooms in cities he had never mentioned visiting, charges to boutique stores and jewelry shops. The picture that emerged was devastating. For months, possibly longer, Henderson had been living a double life. While I sat by Rosalie's hospital bed, reading her stories and holding her hand through chemotherapy sessions, Henderson had been spending our money on someone else. My phone buzzed again with a new text from Henderson. "Hope the service went well. I know how hard this must be for you. I'll be home tomorrow to help with everything." The casual tone, the false sympathy, the complete absence of any real emotion. It was like receiving condolences from a stranger. This wasn't the man I had married 15 years ago. This wasn't the man who had cried with joy when Rosalie was born, who had spent hours teaching her to ride her bike, who had promised to love and protect our family. Or maybe it was, and I had just been too blind to see it. I thought back to the past year, searching for signs I had missed. Henderson's increasing number of business trips, his distraction during family dinners, his reluctance to attend Rosalie's medical appointments. There had been moments when he seemed like a stranger, moments when he would come home and seem surprised to find me and Rosalie there, as if he had forgotten he had a family. The grief I had been carrying transformed into something else, something hot and sharp and clarifying. For months, I had been drowning in sorrow, in fear, in the overwhelming responsibility of caring for a sick child while trying to hold our family together. I had made excuses for Henderson's absence, convinced myself that everyone grieved differently, that some people threw themselves into work when faced with unbearable situations. But this wasn't grief. This was abandonment. This was betrayal of the cruelest kind. As I sat alone in my dark kitchen, surrounded by sympathy cards and funeral flowers, I felt something shifting inside me. The victim I had been, the grieving mother focused only on her daughter's care, was being replaced by someone harder, someone who could see clearly through the fog of manipulation and lies. Henderson thought he was clever. He thought his secret was safe, his double life perfectly hidden. He had probably planned to return tomorrow with some elaborate story about his family emergency, ready to play the grieving father while secretly counting the days until his next escape. But Henderson had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated me. He had no idea that his location was being tracked, that his financial betrayal was documented, that every lie he told was being preserved as evidence. More importantly, he had no idea what I was capable of when pushed beyond my breaking point. I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing. If Henderson wanted to play games, if he wanted to live multiple lives and treat our family like a burden to be escaped from, then I would show him exactly what happened to men who abandoned their wives and daughters. I would show him what happened when the grieving widow stopped grieving and started planning. I spent the entire night digging through our digital life, uncovering layers of deception I never knew existed. My paralegal training had taught me to be thorough, to follow paper trails and document everything, but I had never imagined using these skills to investigate my own husband. The location tracker showed Henderson had been at Serenity Springs since Tuesday morning, 2 full days before Rosalie's funeral. But when I cross-referenced his location history, I discovered this wasn't his first visit. The little blue dot had been at various luxury locations over the past 6 months. The Grandview Hotel, Mountain Vista Resort, Oceanside Retreat, all expensive, all romantic getaways, all during times when he claimed to be on business trips or dealing with work emergencies. I pulled up Henderson's email account, something I had never violated before, but grief and betrayal had erased my respect for his privacy. His password was pathetically predictable. Rosalie 2016, our daughter's birth year. The irony of using our daughter's name to hide his betrayal of our family made my stomach turn. His inbox told a story I wasn't prepared for. There were confirmation, emails for luxury hotel bookings, receipts for expensive dinners and spa reservations, all for 2 people. But it was the email thread with someone named E. Morrison that made my blood run cold. The emails went back 8 months, starting innocent enough with discussions about business opportunities and meeting for coffee. But as I scrolled through the thread, the tone became increasingly intimate. By the 4th month, they were discussing weekend getaways and how to be more discreet. By the 6th month, the emails had turned into love letters. My darling Henderson, one recent email began, "I can't wait to escape with you again. These few days together are the only time I feel truly alive. When will you finally leave her? I'm tired of hiding, tired of being your secret. You promised me that after..." After everything with Rosalie was over, we could be together openly. After everything with Rosalie was over. I read that line again, my hands shaking. This woman, this Erica Morrison, had been waiting for my daughter to die so she could have my husband. Henderson had been planning his escape from our family, while Rosalie fought for her life. I forced myself to read more, each email revealing more of their relationship. They had been together for almost a year, meeting at various resorts and hotels, planning a future that didn't include me or Rosalie. Henderson had told Erica that our marriage was already over, that we were only staying together for Rosalie's sake, and that once she was gone, he would be free to start his new life. He had been using our daughter's terminal illness as a timeline for his affair. One email from Erica, dated just a week ago, contained a photo. I clicked on it with trembling fingers, and there was Henderson, tanned and smiling, holding a martini on a resort balcony. He looked happier than I had seen him in years. The timestamp showed it was taken during what he had told me was a critical business meeting in Chicago. I screenshotted everything, creating a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence. My legal training kicked in as I documented dates, locations, and financial transactions. Every lie Henderson had told was cataloged, every deception exposed and preserved. But I needed more than just emails and bank statements. I needed to know exactly who Erica Morrison was and how deep this betrayal went. A quick Google search revealed that Erica Morrison was a marketing consultant who worked for several high-end hospitality companies. Her LinkedIn profile showed she was divorced, lived in a luxury downtown condo, and frequently traveled for work. She was attractive, successful, and completely unencumbered by the responsibilities of a sick child or a struggling family. Everything I wasn't. Her social media profiles were more revealing than her professional ones. Instagram photos showed her at various upscale restaurants, art galleries, and vacation destinations. Many of the locations matched the charges on Henderson's credit card statements. There were several photos of her with a man whose back was turned to the camera or whose face was strategically obscured, but the watch on his wrist, the shirt he was wearing, the way he held his drink, it was definitely Henderson. One photo particularly caught my attention. It was from last month, taken at a wine tasting event in Napa Valley. The caption read, "Perfect weekend getaway with my mystery man. Sometimes the best relationships are worth waiting for." Henderson had told me he was in Detroit for a manufacturing conference that weekend. I checked Erica's Facebook profile and found more photos, including one that made my heart stop. It was a picture of Henderson's hand holding hers, both of them wearing expensive-looking jewelry. The caption read, "When he says he's ready to make it official, just need to wait a little longer for the right timing." The right timing. They were waiting for Rosalie to die. I called the law firm where I worked, grateful that my boss, Nathan Hartwell, was understanding about giving me time off for the funeral and the aftermath. But now I had a different reason for needing help. "Nathan, it's Abigail. I know I'm supposed to be on bereavement leave, but I need some legal advice. It's personal." "Of course, whatever you need. Are you all right?" "I think Henderson has been embezzling money from our joint accounts and possibly from his company. I need to know what my options are." There was a pause. Nathan had always been more than just my boss. He was a mentor and, I realized now, one of the few people who had consistently shown concern for my well-being during Rosalie's illness. "Bring me everything you have," he said. "I'll review it personally." "Nathan, this stays between us for now. I need to understand the full scope before I make any decisions." "Understood. Come in tomorrow morning. We'll figure this out." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed I had shared with Henderson for 15 years, staring at the ceiling and processing the magnitude of his betrayal. He hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been systematically dismantling our life together while I was trying to save our daughter. The financial records showed that over the past year, Henderson had diverted nearly $40,000 from our joint accounts, money that should have gone to Rosalie's medical care or our family's future. Instead, it had funded his affair, paid for romantic getaways, and supported a lifestyle I didn't even know he wanted. But it was the emotional betrayal that cut deepest. While I had been sleeping in hospital chairs, advocating with insurance companies and researching experimental treatments, Henderson had been planning his exit strategy. Every business trip had been a romantic getaway. Every late night at the office had been dinner with another woman. Every stressful work situation had been him building a new life without us. My phone buzzed with another text from Henderson. "Flight delayed. Won't be home until late tomorrow. Don't wait up. Hope you're managing okay." I stared at the message, knowing it was another lie. The location tracker showed he was still at Serenity Springs, probably having dinner with Erica while I sat alone in our house, surrounded by sympathy flowers and casserole dishes from people who actually cared about our family. I typed back, "Take your time. I'm handling everything just fine." If Henderson could live a double life, then so could I. He thought he was dealing with the same grieving, dependent wife who had spent 2 years focused entirely on Rosalie's care. He had no idea that the woman planning to destroy his carefully constructed lie was someone he had never met, someone who had been forged in the fire of abandonment and betrayal. I opened my laptop and continued building my case. By morning, I would know everything about Henderson's affair, his financial crimes, and his escape plan. And then I would show him exactly what happened when you underestimated a woman who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I sat across from Nathan in his office, a thick folder of evidence spread between us on his mahogany desk. His expression grew darker as he reviewed each document: bank statements, credit card records, email printouts, and location tracker screenshots. "Abigail, this is worse than simple infidelity," Nathan said, adjusting his glasses as he studied Henderson's financial transactions. "He's been systematically embezzling from your joint accounts while you were dealing with Rosalie's medical crisis. This could constitute financial fraud, especially if he was supposed to be using this money for medical expenses." I handed him another set of documents. "There's more. I found evidence that he's been diverting funds from his company as well." Nathan's eyebrows shot up. Henderson worked as a senior accountant at Morrison Industries, ironically, a company owned by Erica's family. The connection hadn't been lost on me. "Look at these expense reports," I said, pointing to documents I had found in Henderson's home office. He's been billing personal expenses to the company. Hotel rooms, dinners, even spa treatments, all claimed as business expenses when they were actually for his affair. Nathan whistled low. "This isn't just marital misconduct, Abigail. This is criminal fraud. If Morrison Industries discovers this, Henderson could face felony charges." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. "He destroyed our family while our daughter was dying. He deserves whatever consequences come his way." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. "What exactly are you planning to do with this information?" I had been thinking about that all night. I want him to lose everything, just like he made me lose everything. His job, his reputation, his relationship with Erica, his financial security, all of it. "We need to be careful about how we proceed," Nathan warned. "If we're going to expose him, we need to do it legally and strategically. Have you considered hiring a private investigator to gather additional evidence?" "Actually, yes. I was hoping you could recommend someone." Nathan reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "Miles Henderson, no relation to your husband, obviously. He's the best investigator I know, specializes in financial crimes and marital misconduct. If there's more to find, he'll find it." I called Miles that afternoon and arranged to meet him at a small cafe downtown. He was a tall, lean man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a careful demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Tell me what you've discovered so far," he said after I explained the basic situation. I showed him everything: the location tracking, the emails, the financial records. Miles took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates and amounts. "This is impressive work for someone without investigative training," he said. "But there are gaps we need to fill. I suspect Henderson's been more careful about covering some of his tracks than others." "What kind of gaps?" "Well, for instance, how long has this affair been going on? You found emails going back 8 months, but the financial irregularities suggest it might be longer. And I'd like to know more about Erica Morrison's role in this. Is she just the other woman, or is she actively helping him embezzle from her? Family's company?" Miles outlined his investigation plan. He would conduct surveillance during Henderson's supposed business trips, dig deeper into both Henderson's and Erica's financial records, and use his contacts at various hotels and resorts to confirm their relationship timeline. "I also want to look into Henderson's work computer," Miles said. "If he's been using company resources for personal communication or falsifying expense reports, there will be a digital trail." "How long will this take?" "Give me 2 weeks. By then, we'll have a complete picture of everything Henderson's been doing and everyone involved." While Miles began his investigation, I focused on protecting myself financially. Nathan helped me open a separate bank account and start documenting all of Henderson's unauthorized withdrawals. We also began the process of freezing our joint accounts to prevent further theft. But I wanted to do more than just protect myself. I wanted to understand Henderson's psychology, to figure out how a man could betray his family so completely while his daughter was dying. I started researching narcissistic personality disorder and affair psychology. What I learned was both illuminating and horrifying. Henderson exhibited classic signs of narcissistic behavior: the sense of entitlement, the lack of empathy, the ability to compartmentalize his actions without experiencing guilt. According to the articles I read, some narcissists actually escalate their selfish behavior during family crises. Instead of being drawn closer by shared suffering, they see tragedy as an inconvenience that interferes with their personal happiness. Henderson hadn't been driven away by Rosalie's illness. He had been annoyed by it. This realization helped me understand his behavior over the past 2 years. Every time I had asked him to come to a medical appointment, every time I had needed emotional support, every time Rosalie had asked for Daddy to read her a bedtime story, Henderson had seen it as an obligation that prevented him from pursuing his own desires. 3 days into Miles's investigation, he called with the first update. "I've confirmed that Henderson and Erica have been together for at least 14 months, not 8, he said. "I found hotel records dating back to last January. They've been meeting monthly, sometimes more frequently." "That means the affair started just 2 months after Rosalie's initial diagnosis," I said, my stomach churning. "It gets worse." I spoke with a contact at Morrison Industries. "Henderson has been falsifying expense reports for over a year, billing the company for approximately $25,000 in personal expenses. And there's something else. Erica Morrison isn't just another employee there. She's the CFO's daughter and is being groomed to take over the financial division." The pieces were falling into place. Henderson hadn't just found a mistress. He had found someone who could advance his career and provide him with the lifestyle he wanted. Erica wasn't just the other woman. She was his ticket to a completely different life. "There's more," Miles continued. "I've been monitoring their communications, and they're planning to move in together next month. Henderson's been looking at apartments in Erica's neighborhood, and she's been pricing engagement rings online." My hands shook as I absorbed this information. While I had been planning Rosalie's funeral, Henderson and Erica had been planning their engagement. "Miles, I need you to find out everything about their future plans, where they're planning to live, when they're planning to announce their relationship, what Henderson's exit strategy is for leaving me. Already on it. I should have more information by the end of the week." That evening, Henderson finally returned home. I watched from the living room window as he pulled into our driveway, noting that he looked tanned and relaxed, hardly the appearance of someone who had been dealing with a family emergency. He entered the house carrying a small gift bag, his expression carefully arranged into what I now recognized as practiced sympathy. "Abigail, honey, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there," he said, moving to embrace me. "The emergency was, well, it was complicated. Family stuff. You know how it is." I let him hug me, fighting every instinct to pull away. "I understand," I said, softly. "These things happen." He seemed surprised by my calm acceptance. "How are you holding up? I know how difficult this must be." "I'm managing," I replied. "I've been keeping busy, taking care of the arrangements, handling the paperwork. You know, all the things that need to be done." Henderson nodded, relief evident on his face. He had expected tears, accusations, demands for explanations. Instead, he was getting the compliant, understanding wife he thought he could continue to manipulate. "I brought you something," he said, handing me the gift bag. "I saw it and thought of you." Inside was an expensive-looking scarf, still bearing the tags from a boutique I recognized from his credit card statements. It was the same store where he had been buying gifts for Erica. "It's beautiful," I said, forcing a smile. "Thank you." As Henderson settled back into our home routine, I marveled at how easily he slipped back into the role of grieving husband and father. He spoke tenderly about Rosalie, expressed regret about missing the funeral, and made plans for us to visit her, grave together. If I hadn't seen the evidence of his betrayal, I might have believed him. His performance was that convincing, but I knew the truth now, and soon, so would everyone else. 2 days after Henderson's return, Miles called with information that made my blood run cold. "Abigail, we need to meet immediately. What I've discovered goes far beyond what we initially suspected." We met at the same cafe, but this time Miles looked grim. He spread several documents across our small table, his voice low and urgent. "Henderson and Erica haven't just been planning to be together after Rosalie passed. They've been actively working to accelerate their timeline." "What do you mean?" Miles pulled out a printed email exchange. "I was able to access more of their communications through Erica's work account. Look at this conversation from 3 weeks ago. The email thread made me sick." Erica had written, "I can't keep waiting, Henderson. Every day this drags on is another day we're not living our real life. Isn't there something we can do to speed things up? The medical bills are bankrupting you anyway." Henderson's response was even worse. "I know, darling. I've been thinking the same thing. What if we just stopped the experimental treatments? The doctors say they're not working anyway. We could tell Abigail that insurance won't cover them anymore." "They were planning to let Rosalie die faster," I whispered, my hand shaking. "It gets worse," Miles said gently. "I found evidence that Henderson actually did cancel one of Rosalie's treatments without telling you. Remember that new immunotherapy trial she was supposed to start in February?" I remembered. Dr. Patricia Chen had been excited about a cutting-edge treatment that could have given Rosalie more time, possibly even a chance at remission. But Henderson had told me that our insurance company rejected it and that the out-of-pocket cost would bankrupt us. "Henderson never submitted the insurance paperwork," Miles continued. "He told the hospital that you had decided against the treatment. Dr. Chen's office has record of a phone call where Henderson said the family had decided to focus on comfort care instead." The room started spinning. "He let her die. He actually let our daughter die so he could be with his mistress." Miles reached across the table and steadied my hands. "There's more evidence. Erica was researching life insurance policies around the same time. She sent Henderson several links to articles about how much life insurance typically pays out for children with terminal illnesses." I stared at him in horror. "They were planning to profit from Rosalie's death?" "It appears so." Henderson increased Rosalie's life insurance policy to $100,000 just 4 months ago. The beneficiary is listed as you, but I found a document in his files, a life insurance assignment form that would transfer the benefits directly to him. The magnitude of their plan was staggering. They hadn't just been waiting for Rosalie to die. They had been actively working to ensure it happened quickly and profitably. My daughter's life had been an obstacle to their happiness, and her death was their financial opportunity. "There's one more thing," Miles said, pulling out a final document. "Henderson has already started the process of having you declared mentally incompetent." "What?" "He's been documenting what he calls your inability to cope with Rosalie's illness. He has notes about your crying, your sleepless nights, your focus on medical treatments he deemed unrealistic. He's been building a case that you're too emotionally unstable to make major financial decisions." I thought back to all the times Henderson had told me I was being too emotional about Rosalie's care, all the moments when he'd suggested I was not thinking clearly about treatment options. He hadn't been trying to help me cope. He had been documenting my grief to use against me. "The plan was to have you institutionalized for a mental health crisis after Rosalie's death," Miles explained. "With you out of the way and declared incompetent, Henderson would have control of all your assets, the life insurance money, and he'd be free to start his new life with Erica." The coffee shop seemed to fade around me as the full scope of Henderson's betrayal became clear. This wasn't just an affair or even financial fraud. This was attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to have me institutionalized. Henderson and Erica had planned to destroy my entire existence, my daughter, my sanity, my freedom, and my future. "How long have they been planning this?" I asked. "Based on the emails, at least 8 months. But some of Henderson's financial moves suggest he's been setting this up for over a year. While I had been fighting to save Rosalie's life, Henderson had been plotting to end it. While I had been advocating for more treatment options, he had been secretly canceling them. While I had been grieving the loss of my daughter, he had been calculating how much money her death would bring him. Miles, I want them destroyed. Both of them. Completely. We have enough evidence for criminal charges. Insurance fraud, conspiracy, potentially even charges related to Rosalie's death if we can prove Henderson's interference with her medical care directly contributed to her passing." I stared at the document spread across our table. Evidence of a conspiracy so cruel it seemed impossible that the man I had married could have conceived it. But the proof was undeniable. "What's our next move?" "We take this to the authorities, but we also need to be strategic. Henderson doesn't know we've discovered their plan. We can use that to our advantage." As we gathered the documents, my phone buzzed with a text from Henderson. "Having dinner with the Peterson clients tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. I showed." The message to Miles, who pulled up Henderson's location on his tracking software. "He's at the Glass Garden restaurant with Erica. They're celebrating something." They were probably toasting Rosalie's death and their bright future together, completely unaware that their entire conspiracy was about to come crashing down. For the first time since Rosalie's diagnosis, I felt powerful. Henderson and Erica thought they had orchestrated the perfect crime, but they had underestimated the woman they had tried to destroy. They were about to learn that the grieving mother they had manipulated was gone, replaced by someone who would make them pay for every moment of pain they had caused. The plan that formed in my mind over the next 3 days was methodical, precise, and designed to destroy Henderson and Erica as systematically as they had tried to destroy me. But first, I needed to ensure they had no idea what was coming. I called Dr. Patricia Chen, Rosalie's oncologist, under the pretense of needing medical records for insurance purposes. "Dr. Chen, I need to clarify something about Rosalie's treatment. History. Henderson mentioned that you recommended against the immunotherapy trial because it wouldn't have helped her condition." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Abigail, I never made such a recommendation. In fact, I was quite upset when your husband called to cancel the treatment." I tried to explain that the trial showed promising results for children with Rosalie's specific markers, but he was adamant that the family had decided against it. He told you we decided against it? Yes, he said. You were both focused on comfort care and didn't want to put Rosalie through any more experimental procedures. I was surprised because you had seemed so hopeful about the trial during our previous conversation. I thanked Dr. Chen and hung up, my hands trembling with rage. Henderson hadn't just passively let our daughter die. He had actively prevented her from receiving potentially life-saving treatment while lying to me about the reasons. That night at dinner, Henderson seemed unusually cheerful, chatting about work and making plans for moving forward with our lives. I've been thinking, he said, cutting into his steak with theatrical precision. Maybe we should consider selling the house. This place has so many memories, and I think a fresh start might be good for both of us. Where would we go? I asked, playing the part of the grieving widow seeking guidance from her strong husband. I've been looking at some condos downtown. Smaller, more manageable, less maintenance for you to worry about. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I want to take care of you, Abigail. You've been through so much. I forced myself to smile. That sounds wonderful. You always know what's best for us. Henderson's relief was palpable. He thought he was successfully manipulating me toward the life he wanted. A life where our family home was sold, the proceeds controlled by him, and I was gradually isolated from everything familiar while he transitioned to his new existence with Erica. After dinner, while Henderson was in the shower, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I called Nathan from my bedroom, speaking in hushed tones. I need you to draft divorce papers immediately, but I don't want them filed yet. I also need you to prepare documentation to freeze all of Henderson's assets and accounts. We're going to coordinate everything so it happens simultaneously. Abigail, are you sure you want to move this quickly? Once we trigger this, there's no going back. Nathan, they tried to kill my daughter and have me institutionalized. There's already no going back. The next morning, I put on the performance of my life. I made Henderson's favorite breakfast, packed his lunch, and kissed him. Goodbye with apparent affection. I have some errands to run today, I told him, meeting with the insurance company about Rosalie's final bills. Take your time, he said, his tone indulgent. I know how confusing all that paperwork can be. If you need help understanding anything, just call me. Instead of going to the insurance office, I drove to the FBI field office downtown. Miles had connected me with Agent Sarah Williams, who specialized in financial crimes and conspiracy cases. Mrs. Abigail, what you've uncovered constitutes several federal crimes, Agent Williams said after reviewing our evidence. Insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and if we can prove Henderson's interference with medical care directly contributed to your daughter's death, we may be looking at charges of negligent homicide. What do you need from me? We need you to help us catch them in the act. Are you willing to wear a wire and record conversations with your husband? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Agent Williams fitted me with a small recording device and coached me on how to elicit incriminating statements from Henderson. The plan was simple. I would express concerns about our financial situation and see if Henderson would admit to any of his fraudulent activities. That evening, I initiated the conversation as Henderson and I sat on our back porch, the same place where we used to watch Rosalie play in the yard. Henderson, I've been looking at our finances and I'm worried. Between Rosalie's medical bills and the funeral expenses, we're in pretty bad shape. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. Don't worry about that, honey. I've been handling everything. We're in better shape than you think. But the bank statements show we've spent so much money. Where did it all go? Medical expenses, mostly. Some business investments that will pay off soon. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. I pressed harder. I found some charges I don't understand. Hotel bills, restaurant expenses in cities where you said you were on business trips. And what about that life insurance policy on Rosalie? I don't remember agreeing to increase the amount. Henderson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Abigail, you were so focused on Rosalie's care that you weren't thinking clearly about our financial future. I had to make some decisions to protect us. Protect us how? The life insurance was just being practical. With all the medical debt, we needed to ensure we could cover everything if... He paused, seeming to realize he was walking into dangerous territory. If what, Henderson? If the worst happened. Which... It did, and now we can pay off the debt and start fresh. The recording device captured every word, every admission that our daughter's death had been a financial opportunity rather than a tragedy. Over the next 2 days, I recorded 3 more conversations, each one revealing more of Henderson's calculations and his eagerness to move forward with our lives. He talked about selling the house, relocating, and starting over in a way that made it clear he had been planning this transformation long before Rosalie died. Meanwhile, Miles gathered the final pieces of evidence we needed. He had photographs of Henderson and Erica apartment hunting together, recordings of phone conversations where they discussed their timeline for going public with their relationship, and financial records showing that Erica had been helping Henderson launder his embezzled funds through her personal accounts. On Friday evening, Henderson came home with champagne and Chinese takeout from our favorite restaurant. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "I got some good news at work today. The Peterson merger went through, and there's going to be a significant bonus. I thought we should celebrate." I knew the truth was different. Miles had informed me that Henderson had actually submitted his resignation that day, effective immediately. The celebration wasn't about a bonus. It was about his freedom from the last obstacles to his new life. As we sat at our kitchen table, sharing what I knew would be our last meal together as husband and wife, Henderson raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his eyes shining with anticipation. "To new beginnings," I echoed, knowing that his new beginning would be in a federal prison cell. Henderson had no idea that while he was toasting his escape, federal agents were preparing arrest warrants. He had no idea that his resignation letter would never be processed because he would be in custody by Monday morning. Most importantly, he had no idea that the grieving, confused widow he thought he was manipulating had recorded every incriminating word he had spoken. The trap was set, and Henderson had walked into it willingly, eagerly, with the same casual cruelty he had shown when planning our daughter's death. Monday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Henderson hummed while making coffee, seemingly oblivious to the storm about to break over his carefully constructed world. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, marveling at how relaxed he appeared. Today was supposed to be his first day of freedom. His resignation from Morrison Industries would be processed, and he could begin transitioning to his new life with Erica. Instead, it would be the day his entire world collapsed. "You seem happy this morning," I observed, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Henderson's smile was genuine, the first real emotion I had seen from him in months. "I am happy. I feel like we're finally moving in the right direction. New beginnings, remember?" I remember. I sat across from him at our kitchen table, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals as a family, where Rosalie had done her homework, where Henderson had planned the destruction of our lives while I fought to save our daughter. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Williams. "Everything is in motion. Stay calm and act normal. This will all be over soon." Henderson glanced at my phone. "Who's texting you so early?" "Just Alice. She's been checking on me a lot since the funeral." The lie came easily now. I had learned to match Henderson's casual deception with my own. "That's nice of her. Family support is important during difficult times." Henderson's tone was perfectly sympathetic, the concerned husband playing his role flawlessly. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Family support from the man who had tried to kill his own daughter and institutionalize his wife. "Henderson, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Do you ever feel guilty about missing Rosalie's funeral? The question caught him off guard. I watched his expression carefully, noting the brief flicker of annoyance that crossed his features before he arranged his face back into practiced remorse. Every day, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I hate that I wasn't there for you, for her. But sometimes life forces impossible choices on us. What kind of impossible choice? Henderson's grip on my hand tightened slightly. The family emergency I told you about. It was my cousin Mark. He was in a car accident and they didn't think he was going to make it. His wife called me, hysterical, begging me to come. I couldn't say no. Another lie, delivered with the same earnest conviction as all the others. There was no cousin Mark, no car accident, no family emergency. There was only Henderson and Erica at a luxury resort, celebrating their freedom while I buried our daughter, alone. I understand, I said softly. These things happen. Henderson relaxed, relieved that I was still buying his fiction. He had no idea that every word of our conversation was being recorded by the device Agent Williams had given me, creating a permanent record of his continued deception even after being caught. At 8:30 a.m., Henderson kissed me goodbye and headed to his car. I'll be home early today. Maybe we can look at those condo listings I mentioned. That sounds perfect, I replied, watching from the window as he backed out of our driveway for the last time as a free man. 30 minutes later, Miles called with an update. Henderson just arrived at Morrison Industries. He has no idea what's waiting for him. The FBI coordinated with company security to ensure he can't leave the building once he enters. What about Erica? Agents are moving on her apartment as we speak. She won't have a chance to warn Henderson or destroy evidence. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of our family life. Rosalie's toys still in their basket, family photos on the mantelpiece, Henderson's coffee cup still warm on the kitchen counter. Soon, this house would be just mine, easy space where I could grieve properly and begin to heal without the poison of Henderson's presence. At 9:15 a.m., Nathan called. The divorce papers are being served simultaneously with the arrest warrant. I've also filed for immediate asset freezing on all of Henderson's accounts and properties. By the time he's processed into custody, he'll have nothing left. What about the life insurance money? Already transferred to a protected account in your name only. Henderson will never see a penny of it. At 9:45 a.m., Agent Williams called with the news I had been waiting for. We have him. Henderson was arrested in the Courtier Morrison Industries parking garage as he tried to leave the building. Apparently, someone called to warn him that federal agents were in the lobby, but security prevented his escape. Someone called to warn him? We believe it was Erica, but she was arrested at her apartment before she could flee. They're both in custody now. I closed my eyes, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For 2 years, I had been living under the shadow of Henderson's manipulation and lies. Now, finally, the truth was in the light. What happens next? They'll be arraigned tomorrow. With the evidence we have, I expect they'll both be denied bail. The conspiracy charges alone carry significant prison time, and if we can prove negligent, homicide in Rosalie's death, they could be looking at decades behind bars. After hanging up, I walked through our house one more time, seeing it differently now. This wasn't the home where my husband had betrayed me. It was the place where my daughter had been loved, where she had laughed and played and felt safe. Henderson's corruption couldn't touch those memories. I stopped in Rosalie's room, sitting on her small bed and holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. The sunlight streaming through her windows felt warm and peaceful, free from the dark energy that Henderson's presence had brought to our home. It's over, sweetheart, I whispered to the empty room. The people who hurt you are going to pay for what they did, and Mommy is going to be okay. For the first time since Rosalie's diagnosis, I felt truly alone in our house, but it wasn't the terrifying isolation of abandonment. It was the peaceful solitude of someone who had survived a war and could finally rest. My phone rang again. This time, it was Alice. "Abigail, I just saw the news online. They're saying Henderson was arrested for fraud and conspiracy. What's happening?" "It's a long story, Alice, but it's finally over." "Oh my God, are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "Actually, yes, I'd like that very much." As I waited for my sister to arrive, I stood on my back porch, looking out at the yard where Rosalie used to play. The swing set Henderson had built for her 3rd birthday still stood in the corner, a reminder of happier times before illness and betrayal had invaded our lives. Henderson was probably sitting in a jail cell by now, finally understanding that his perfect plan had been perfectly exposed. Erica was discovering that her luxury lifestyle was about to be replaced by prison uniforms and court-appointed attorneys. And I was standing in the sunshine, breathing freely for the first time in years, knowing that justice for my daughter was finally within reach. The local news broke the story at noon, just as Alice and I were having lunch on my back porch. My sister nearly choked on her sandwich when the reporter announced, "Local accountant Henderson Matthews and Morrison Industries executive Erica Morrison were arrested this morning on federal charges including conspiracy, insurance fraud, and embezzlement." "Abigail," Alice said slowly, "how did you know this was going to happen?" I had spent the morning telling Alice everything. Henderson's affair, the canceled treatments, the conspiracy to have me institutionalized, their plan to profit from Rosalie's death. With each revelation, my sister's face had grown paler, her anger more pronounced. "I've been working with the FBI for the past week," I explained, "building the case, gathering evidence, making sure they couldn't escape justice." Alice stared at me with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "My God, Abigail. While you were grieving our niece, you were also taking down the people who killed her." The weight of those words, "the people who killed her," settled over us both. It was the first time anyone had said it so directly, and hearing it out loud made the reality even more stark. My phone rang. It was Agent Williams. "Mrs. Matthews, I wanted to update you on the arrests. Henderson is demanding to speak with you. He's claiming there's been some kind of misunderstanding and that you can clear everything up." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. But I thought you should know. He genuinely seems shocked that we know about his activities. He keeps asking how we found out about Erica, how we got access to his financial records. He has no idea that you've been investigating him. Can I see him?" There was a pause. "It's not standard procedure, but given your cooperation with our investigation and the unique circumstances, I can arrange a monitored meeting. Are you sure you want to do that?" I looked out at Rosalie's swing set, thinking about all the times Henderson had pushed her on those swings while secretly planning her death. Yes, I want to look him in the eye when he realizes what I've done. 2 hours later, I sat in a sterile interview room at the Federal Building, waiting for Henderson to be brought in. Agent Williams and Nathan sat beside me while Miles observed from behind one-way glass. When the door opened and Henderson shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, I almost didn't recognize him. The confident, manipulative man who had kissed me goodbye that morning was gone, replaced by someone who looked confused and desperate. "Abigail." Henderson's voice was filled with relief when he saw me. "Thank God you're here. There's been a terrible mistake. These people think I've been stealing money, that I've been having an affair. You have to tell them it's not true." I studied his face carefully. Even now, faced with overwhelming evidence of his crimes, Henderson was still trying to manipulate me. He genuinely believed that I was too naive, too trusting, too broken by grief to have uncovered his conspiracy. "Sit down, Henderson," Agent Williams instructed. Henderson remained standing, his eyes locked on mine. "Abigail, you know me. You know I would never hurt you or Rosalie. Whatever they think they've found, it's been taken out of context. Tell Me about Erica Morrison, I said quietly. Henderson's face went pale. What about her? She's a colleague. We work together sometimes. I reached into my bag and pulled out one of the photographs Miles had taken. Henderson and Erica kissing outside the Grandview Hotel. I slid it across the table toward him. Henderson stared at the photo, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Tell me about the immunotherapy trial that could have saved Rosalie's life, I continued. The one you canceled without telling me. I don't know what you're talking about. I placed a printout of Dr. Chen's notes on the table. Henderson Matthews, called to cancel treatment. Stated that family decided to focus on comfort care instead. Henderson's hands were shaking now. Abigail, you have to understand. Tell me about the $40,000 you stole from our joint accounts. Tell me about the life insurance policy you increased on our dying daughter. Tell me about your plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. With each piece of evidence I presented, Henderson seemed to shrink further into himself. The confident manipulator was being systematically dismantled, just as he had tried to dismantle my life. How? He whispered finally. How did you find out? I leaned forward, my voice steady and cold. You made one crucial mistake, Henderson. You underestimated me. You thought I was just a grieving mother, too broken to see what you were doing. But while you were planning my destruction, I was planning yours. Henderson's facade finally cracked. Completely. Abigail, please, I know how this looks, but I love you. I love our family. Everything I did was to protect us. Protect us? My voice rose for the first time. You let our daughter die, Henderson. You canceled her treatment so you could run away with your mistress. You planned to steal her life insurance money and have me locked away in a mental institution. How exactly does that protect us? Henderson was crying now, but I felt nothing for his tears. I never meant for Rosalie to die. I couldn't handle it anymore. The hospitals, the treatments that weren't working, watching her suffer. Erica offered me a way out, a chance at happiness. A chance at happiness, I repeated, while your daughter was dying. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The doctors said the immunotherapy probably wouldn't work anyway. I thought maybe it was better to let her go peacefully. Agent Williams leaned forward. Mr. Matthews, are you admitting that you intentionally canceled your daughter's medical treatment? Henderson looked around the room wildly, finally understanding that every word he spoke was being recorded, that his admissions were sealing his fate. I want a lawyer, he said suddenly. Too late for that conversation, I said, standing up. Just like it was too late for Rosalie when you decided her life was less important than your affair. As I walked toward the door, Henderson called out desperately, Abigail, please, don't leave me like this. I'm still your husband. We can work through this. I turned back to look at him one final time. No, Henderson. You stopped being my husband the moment you chose Erica over our daughter. You stopped being my husband when you planned to destroy my life for your convenience. And you definitely stopped being my husband when you let our child die for money. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, shutting out Henderson's desperate pleas. In the hallway, Nathan put a comforting hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? He asked. I considered the question carefully. Free, I said finally. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. Henderson would spend the rest of his life in prison, finally understanding the consequences of his choices. Erica would face the same fate, learning that love built on betrayal and conspiracy always ends in destruction. But I would go home to my daughter's memory, knowing that justice had been served and that the people who had stolen her life would never hurt anyone else's family again. The media storm that followed Henderson and Erica's arrests was unlike anything I could have imagined. By the second day, news vans lined our street, reporters camping outside our house with cameras and microphones, all desperate for a statement from the grieving mother who brought down a conspiracy. I refused all interviews, but Alice served, as my spokesperson, reading a carefully prepared statement. Abigail Matthews is focused on grieving her daughter and seeking justice for the crimes committed against her family. She will not be making public statements at this time. What the media didn't know was that I was preparing for something much more personal than press conferences. I was getting ready to face Erica Morrison. Agent Williams had called that morning with an unexpected development. Erica wants to meet with you. Her attorney thinks she might be willing to provide additional testimony against Henderson in exchange for a reduced sentence. What kind of additional testimony? Details about how long they've been planning this, other potential victims, the full scope of their financial crimes. She claims Henderson has been embezzling from Morrison Industries for years, not just the amounts we've discovered. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me never wanted to see the woman who had conspired to kill my daughter. But another part of me needed to understand how someone could be so callous, so calculating about the death of an innocent child. I'll meet with her, I decided. But I want to record the conversation. The meeting was arranged for the next afternoon, at the Federal Building. Unlike Henderson's interview room, this one felt more formal, with Erica's defense attorney present alongside Agent Williams and Nathan. Erica looked different than she had in the social media photos Miles had shown me. Prison had stripped away her polished veneer, revealing someone younger and more fragile than I had expected. Her expensive highlights were growing out, her designer clothes replaced by a standard orange jumpsuit. When I entered the room, she looked up with what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Mrs. Matthews," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for your loss." The words hit me like a slap. This woman had actively plotted my daughter's death and was now offering condolences as if Rosalie had died of natural causes. "Are you?" I asked, taking a seat across from her. "Are you really sorry Rosalie died, or are you sorry you got caught?" Erica's attorney started to object, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I deserve that. I know how this looks, how evil it must seem. But you have to understand, Henderson told me your daughter was going to die anyway. He said the treatments weren't working, that you were in denial about her condition. So you decided to help speed things along?" "No," Erica's voice cracked. "It wasn't like that. Henderson said the experimental treatment was just prolonging her suffering, that it was bankrupting your family for nothing. He made it sound like mercy." I leaned forward, studying her face carefully. "Tell me about the life insurance research you did. Tell me about the emails where you calculated how much money Rosalie's death would bring you." Erica's composure crumbled. Tears started flowing down her cheeks as she spoke. "I didn't know about the life insurance increase until after it was done. Henderson told me he was just being practical, making sure you'd be financially secure if something happened. I didn't realize he had changed the beneficiary assignment. But you knew about the plan to have me institutionalized." Her silence was, "Answer enough. Tell me about that, Erica. Tell me how you justified destroying a grieving mother's sanity." "Henderson said you were having a breakdown, that you couldn't accept reality about Rosalie's condition. He showed me recordings of you crying, photos of you looking exhausted and overwhelmed. He said you needed help, professional care." I felt a cold rage building in my chest. He was documenting my grief to use against me, and you believed that was love? "I thought I was helping," Erica whispered. "Henderson painted this picture of a woman who was suffering, who needed to be protected from making decisions she couldn't handle. He made it sound like the kindest thing we could do was take that burden away from you, the burden of loving my dying daughter." Erica flinched as if I had struck her. "When you put it like that, how else would I put it?" My voice was rising now, all the anger and pain of the past months pouring out. "You conspired to kill an 8-year-old girl. You planned to steal her life insurance money. You wanted to have her mother declared insane so you could live happily ever after with the money from her death? How exactly should I put that?" I know how it sounds, Erica said, her voice barely audible. But I never thought of it as killing her. Henderson said she was going to die anyway, that we were just accepting reality. Reality? I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone in the room jump. Reality was that my daughter had a chance with that immunotherapy trial. Reality was that children with her condition have survived with aggressive treatment. Reality was that you and Henderson decided her life was worth less than your happiness. Erica was sobbing now, her carefully composed demeanor completely shattered. I didn't know about the treatment success rates. Henderson said the doctors gave her no hope. Did you ever once think to verify what Henderson was telling you? Did you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, the man who was lying to his wife might also be lying to you? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Erica's attorney shifted uncomfortably as his client struggled to respond. I believed him because I loved him, she said finally. I trusted him completely. You trusted a man who was betraying his dying daughter. What does that say about your judgment? Agent Williams intervened gently. Mrs. Matthews, let's focus on the additional information Ms. Morrison can provide about Henderson's other crimes. But I wasn't finished. Tell me about the night Rosalie died, Erica. Tell me what you and Henderson did to celebrate. Erica's face went white. We didn't celebrate. Henderson was devastated when he got the call. Really? Because the location tracker showed he was at your apartment that night. He came straight from our daughter's deathbed to your bed. He needed comfort, Erica said weakly. He was grieving, too. He was grieving? I stood up, my voice echoing, off the walls. He was grieving the daughter he helped kill? The daughter whose treatment he canceled? The daughter whose death he profited from? Erica broke down completely then, her sobs filling the room. Between gasps, she managed to speak. I'll tell you everything. Every crime Henderson committed, every lie he told, every plan we made. I'll testify against him in court. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Nothing you do will make this right, I said coldly. Nothing you say will bring Rosalie back. But maybe, just maybe, your testimony will ensure that Henderson spends the rest of his life in prison, thinking about the daughter he murdered for money. As I left the room, Erica's cries followed me down the hallway. I felt no satisfaction. In her breakdown, no pleasure in her pain. All I felt was the cold certainty that justice was finally being served. Henderson and Erica had destroyed my family for their selfish desires. But in the end, their love had destroyed them both. Now they would spend the rest of their lives paying for the choices they made, while I would spend mine honoring the memory of the daughter they tried to erase. The domino effect of Henderson and Erica's arrests was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours of Erica's confession, Morrison Industries launched their own internal investigation, uncovering a web of financial fraud that went back nearly 3 years. I watched the news coverage from my living room, Alice beside me with a cup of tea, as reporters stood outside the gleaming Morrison Industries headquarters. The company's stock had plummeted overnight, and the board of directors was calling for a complete audit of all financial operations. Morrison Industries CEO William Morrison announced today that his daughter, Erica Morrison, has been terminated from her position and that the company is cooperating fully with federal investigators, the reporter announced. Sources close to the investigation suggest that the embezzlement scheme may have cost the company upwards of $500,000. My phone rang. It was Agent Williams. Mrs. Matthews, I wanted to update you on the broader investigation. Erica's testimony has opened up a much larger case than we initially anticipated. What do you mean? Henderson wasn't just stealing from your family and falsifying his expense reports. He's been running a sophisticated embezzlement scheme at Morrison Industries for years. Erica helped him create fake vendor accounts, dummy corporations, and fraudulent invoices. We're looking at federal RICO charges now. RICO, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. I knew from my paralegal training that RICO charges carried sentences of up to 20 years in federal prison. There's more, Agent Williams continued. We've discovered that you and Rosalie weren't their only targets. Henderson has been systematically targeting other families with sick children, offering to help them with insurance claims and medical billing, then skimming money from their accounts. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Other families? At least 6 that we've identified so far. Parents who were desperate, overwhelmed by medical bills, and trusted Henderson to help them navigate the system. He's been stealing from grieving families for over 2 years. I thought about all the times Henderson had come home talking about helping colleagues with their insurance problems, families dealing with medical crises. I had been proud of his compassion, his willingness to use his accounting expertise to help people in need. Instead, he had been preying on their desperation. We need your help identifying potential victims, Agent Williams said. Henderson mentioned helping various families over the years. We need to track down everyone he might have defrauded. I spent the next several hours going through Henderson's files, his computer, and his phone records, looking for evidence of other victims. What I found was a systematic pattern of exploitation that made me sick to my stomach. Henderson had specifically targeted families with children who had cancer, rare diseases, or chronic conditions requiring expensive long-term care. He would offer to help them organize their finances, set up payment plans with hospitals, and maximize their insurance benefits. Instead, he had been siphoning money from their accounts, sometimes taking as much as 20% of their medical funds. One file particularly caught my attention. It belonged to Sarah and Michael Torres, a young couple whose 4-year-old son had been diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder. Henderson had helped them organize their medical expenses for over a year, while secretly stealing nearly $15,000 from their son's treatment fund. I called Agent Williams immediately. I need you to contact the Torres family. Their son Diego, Henderson, has been stealing from his medical fund. We'll reach out to them today. Are there others? I looked at the stack of files in front of me. Too many. Henderson has been running a medical fraud scheme targeting families with sick children. He's been stealing from people at their most vulnerable moments. The next morning, the story exploded across national news. Henderson wasn't just a man who had betrayed his own family. He was a predator who had systematically targeted grieving parents and sick children for financial gain. My phone rang constantly with requests for interviews. Reporters wanted to know how I had uncovered the conspiracy, how I felt about my husband's crimes, whether I planned to write a book or make a movie about my experience. I ignored them all, but I did agree to one interview with Sarah Torres. We met at a small cafe downtown, 2 mothers who had been victimized by the same man. Sarah was younger than me, with exhausted eyes and the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time in hospitals. I can't believe he's been stealing from Diego's treatment fund, she said, her voice shaking. We trusted him completely. When Diego needed that experimental surgery last year, Henderson helped us organize a fundraiser, set up a special account for donations. I thought he was an angel. How much did he take? Nearly $15,000. Money that could have paid for Diego's physical therapy, his medications, his follow-up treatments. Sarah's hands were trembling as she spoke. We've been struggling to pay for his care, rationing his medications, and the whole time Henderson was stealing from us. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sarah, I'm so sorry. If I had known what he was doing to other families, I would have stopped him sooner. You couldn't have known. He was so convincing, so professional. He showed us spreadsheets, gave us detailed reports about where every dollar was going. I never thought to verify any of it. The weight of Henderson's crimes was staggering. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the trust he had violated, the hope he had stolen from families who were already fighting impossible battles. What happens now? Sarah asked. He goes to prison for a very long time. And hopefully, the government can recover some of the money he stole from your family and the others. That afternoon, I did something I had never planned to do. I called the local news station and agreed to give a statement. The reporter, a professional woman named Jessica Chen, met me at my house. As we sat in my living room, surrounded by photos of Rosalie, I looked directly into the camera and spoke, from my heart. Henderson Matthews didn't just betray his own family. He systematically preyed on families with sick children, stealing money that was meant to save lives. He turned medical crises into personal profit opportunities, and he did. It all while presenting himself as a helpful, caring professional. I paused, looking at Rosalie's photo on the mantle. To the families who trusted him, who believed he was helping them during the worst times of their lives, I am deeply sorry. Henderson's crimes don't just represent financial fraud. They represent a betrayal of everything we hold sacred about protecting our children and supporting each other in times of crisis. The interview aired that evening, and by the next morning, dozens more victims had come forward. Henderson's scheme had been even more extensive than we had initially discovered. But for me, the most important call came from Agent Williams. Mrs. Matthews, I wanted to let you know. The Torres family and 4 other victim families have agreed to testify at Henderson's sentencing hearing. Their testimony, combined with Erica's cooperation and your evidence, should ensure that Henderson receives the maximum possible sentence. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. Henderson had tried to destroy not just my family, but dozens of others. But his victims were fighting back, and together, we would ensure that justice was served. Henderson had spent years carefully constructing his web of lies and financial fraud. Now, in a matter of days, that web had been completely dismantled, exposing him as the predator he truly was. The courtroom was packed for Henderson's sentencing hearing. I sat in the front row, flanked by Alice and Nathan, watching as families I had never met filed in to testify about how Henderson had stolen from their children's medical funds. The Torres family, the Williamses whose daughter had cystic fibrosis, the Johnsons whose son battled brain cancer, all victims of Henderson's systematic exploitation. Judge Margaret Thornton presided over the hearing with stern efficiency. She had already reviewed the mountain of evidence we had compiled: financial records, recorded conversations, email exchanges, and testimony from dozens of witnesses. Henderson sat at the defense table looking gaunt and defeated, a far cry from the confident man who had kissed me goodbye just 3 months earlier. The prosecution began by calling Agent Williams to summarize the scope of Henderson's crimes. Your Honor, the defendant orchestrated a complex conspiracy that lasted over 3 years, Agent Williams testified. He systematically targeted families with critically ill children, positioning himself as a helpful financial advisor while stealing from their medical funds. In total, Mr. Matthews embezzled over $300,000 from victim families and an additional $400,000 from Morrison Industries. The judge leaned forward. Agent Williams, can you explain the connection between the defendant's personal crimes and his professional fraud? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Matthews used his position at Morrison Industries to create fraudulent vendor accounts and dummy corporations. He then used these fake entities to launder money stolen from victim families. His co-conspirator, Erica Morrison, helped facilitate this scheme by approving fake invoices and transferring funds through her family's company. When it was time for victim impact statements, I watched as family after family stood to describe how Henderson's betrayal had affected their lives. Sarah Torres spoke first, her voice steady despite her obvious emotion. Your Honor, my son Diego needed experimental treatment that cost $30,000. Our community raised that money through fundraisers, bake sales, and donations from people who cared about our family. Henderson Matthews stole $15,000 from our son's treatment fund, money that could have paid for physical therapy, medications, and follow-up care that Diego still needs today. Michael Torres stood beside his wife. We trusted Henderson completely. He seemed so professional, so caring. He told us he understood what we were going through because his own daughter was sick. We never imagined that someone would use our child's illness to steal from us. One by one, the families testified. The Williams family described how Henderson had stolen $8,000 from their daughter's cystic fibrosis treatment fund. The Johnsons explained how $12,000 meant for their son's brain cancer surgery had disappeared into Henderson's personal accounts. Each testimony was a dagger through Henderson's facade of respectability. With every story, the judge's expression grew more severe. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom upon me. I had prepared remarks, but when I looked at Henderson sitting at the defense table, all my planned words disappeared. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and strong. "Henderson Matthews didn't just steal money from families with sick children. He stole hope. He stole trust. And in my case, he stole my daughter's life." I turned to face Henderson directly. He couldn't meet my eyes. Henderson canceled Rosalie's potentially life-saving treatment without telling me. He increased her life, insurance policy, and planned to profit from her death. He documented my grief to build a case for having me declared mentally incompetent so he could control her insurance payout. While I sat by our daughter's bedside, he was planning his new life with another woman, using our daughter's death as a timeline for his freedom. The courtroom was absolutely silent. But Henderson made one crucial mistake. He underestimated a mother's love and a mother's determination to seek justice for her child. He thought he could manipulate me, control me, and ultimately discard me. Instead, he taught me exactly how strong I could be when someone I loved was threatened. I looked back at the judge. "Your Honor, Henderson Matthews is not just a thief. He is a predator who weaponized compassion and turned medical crises into personal profit opportunities. He represents the worst of humanity, someone who sees others' suffering as his own opportunity. I ask that you sentence him to the maximum penalty allowed by law, not just for what he did to my family, but to ensure he can never prey on vulnerable families again." As I returned to my seat, I could hear Henderson crying softly at the defense table. His attorney stood to make a plea for leniency, but his words felt hollow and inadequate after the devastating testimony from his victims. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges his mistakes and deeply regrets his actions. He was under tremendous stress due to his daughter's illness and made poor decisions that he now recognizes were wrong. We ask for mercy and the opportunity for Mr. Matthews to make restitution to his victims." Judge Thornton's response was swift and sharp. "Counselor, your client didn't make poor decisions under stress. He orchestrated a systematic conspiracy to defraud vulnerable families over a period of years. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated pattern of exploitation." The judge then asked Henderson if he wished to make a statement before sentencing. Henderson stood slowly, his legs shaking visibly. "Your Honor," he said, his voice barely audible, "I know that nothing I say can undo the harm I've caused. I know that my actions were inexcusable. I was drowning in debt and desperation, and I made choices that destroyed my family and hurt innocent people. I am deeply sorry for the pain I've caused, especially to my wife and the memory of my daughter." He paused, looking briefly in my direction. "Abigail, if you can hear me, I know I can never ask for your forgiveness. I know that what I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that I loved Rosalie, and I will regret my actions for the rest of my life." Judge Thornton waited for Henderson to sit down before delivering her sentence. "Mr. Matthews, the court has reviewed extensive evidence of your crimes, which span multiple years and victimized dozens of families during their most vulnerable moments. You exploited the trust of parents whose children were fighting for their lives. You turned medical emergencies into personal profit opportunities. Most egregiously, you interfered with your own daughter's medical care for financial gain." She paused, looking directly at Henderson. The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. You will also pay full restitution to all victim families, and all your assets will be liquidated to fund these payments. Additionally, you are permanently barred from working in any financial or advisory capacity. The gavel came down with a resounding crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. 25 years. Henderson would be in his 70s when he was released, if he lived that long. His life, as he had known it, was over. As the bailiffs led Henderson away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one final time. I met his gaze steadily, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction of justice served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions, but I had only one statement to make. Today, justice was served not just for my daughter Rosalie, but for all the children whose families were victimized by Henderson Matthews. No amount of prison time can undo the damage he caused, but at least he can never hurt another family again. 3 weeks after Henderson's sentencing, an envelope arrived at my door with no return address. My hands trembled as I recognized the handwriting. It was from Henderson, somehow smuggled out of federal prison. I almost threw it away unopened. I had no desire to read his self-serving excuses or manipulative pleas for sympathy. But something about the weight of the envelope, the thickness of the pages inside, made me hesitate. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the envelope for nearly an hour before finally tearing it open. "Abigail," the letter began, "I know you have every right to throw this away without reading it, and I wouldn't blame you if you did. But there are things you need to know. Things I couldn't say in court because they would have made everything worse for everyone involved." I set the letter down, my heart racing. What could Henderson possibly have to tell me that would matter now? He was in prison for the rest of his meaningful life. Our marriage was over. Justice had been served, but curiosity won, and I continued reading. The experimental treatment that Dr. Chen wanted to try on Rosalie. I didn't just cancel it because I was selfish or because I wanted to be with Erica. I canceled it because I knew something you didn't know, something the doctors didn't tell you because they were afraid it would destroy your hope. My hands started shaking as I read the next paragraph. 3 days before I made the call to cancel the immunotherapy, Dr. Chen pulled me aside after one of Rosalie's appointments. She told me that the treatment had been tried on 12 other children with Rosalie's specific markers. 11 of them had died within 6 weeks, not from the cancer, but from catastrophic reactions to the treatment itself. The 12th child survived, but suffered permanent organ damage that left her unable to walk or speak. I dropped the letter, my coffee cup clattering against the table and spilling across the surface. This couldn't be true. Dr. Chen had been optimistic about the treatment, had called it promising, had made it sound like Rosalie's best chance. I forced myself to keep reading. Dr. Chen swore me to secrecy. She said that if you knew the real statistics, you would refuse the treatment entirely, and there was still a small chance it could work. She thought it was better for you to believe I was being cruel than for you to know how hopeless the situation really was. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I made the decision to protect you from that knowledge, even though I knew it would make me look like a monster. I thought it was better for you to hate me than to know that our daughter was going to die no matter what we did. The doctors had given up hope, but I couldn't bear to take yours away. I read the paragraph again, then a third time, my mind struggling to process what Henderson was telling me. I know this doesn't excuse the affair, or the money I stole, or any of the other terrible things I did. Those crimes were inexcusable, and I deserve every year of my sentence. But I need you to know that when it came to Rosalie's treatment, I wasn't choosing Erica over our daughter. I was choosing to carry the burden of that knowledge alone, rather than destroying your hope in her final weeks. The letter continued for several more pages, detailing conversations with doctors that I had never been part of, medical consultations that Henderson had attended alone, and the gradual realization that Rosalie's condition was far worse than anyone had told me. The cancer had already metastasized to her brain by February. The doctors knew she had weeks, not months. They were just trying to make those weeks as comfortable as possible while maintaining the illusion that we were still fighting. I sat in my kitchen as the afternoon light faded to evening, reading and rereading Henderson's letter. If what he was saying was true, then everything I thought I knew about Rosalie's final months was a lie. The doctors had been lying to protect my hope. Henderson had been lying to protect me from despair. But it also meant that Rosalie was always going to die, regardless of Henderson's actions. The experimental treatment wouldn't have saved her. It might have made her final weeks even more painful. For the first time since discovering Henderson's betrayal, I found myself questioning whether I had been fighting for justice or revenge, the Yar. Truth, it seemed, was far more complicated than I had ever imagined. I couldn't sleep for 3 days after reading Henderson's letter. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dr. Chen's face during those final appointments, searching for signs of the deception Henderson described. Had she really been lying to me about Rosalie's chances? Had everyone been protecting me from a truth too devastating to bear? On Thursday morning, I made a decision that I knew would either provide closure or destroy what remained of my peace of mind. I called Dr. Chen's office and scheduled an appointment. Dr. Patricia Chen looked older than I remembered, more worn down by the weight of treating children who couldn't be saved. When I walked into her office, her expression immediately shifted to one of concern. "Abigail, I was so sorry to hear about everything that happened with Henderson. I had no idea about his other activities." I sat across from her desk, Henderson's letter folded in my purse. "Dr. Chen, I need to ask you about Rosalie's treatment, specifically about the immunotherapy trial." She stiffened slightly, and I knew immediately that Henderson's letter contained at least some truth. "What about it?" "I need to know the real success rates, not the hopeful estimates you gave me, but the actual results from children with Rosalie's specific markers." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded carefully on her desk. "Abigail, why are you asking about this now? Rosalie is gone, and I know how difficult—" "Because my husband wrote me a letter from prison claiming that you told him the treatment had failed catastrophically in 11 out of 12 similar cases. I need to know if that's true." The color drained from Dr. Chen's face. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me with eyes full of regret. "Henderson wasn't supposed to tell you that." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. "So it's true. Abigail, you have to understand the position we were in. Your daughter's cancer had metastasized to her brainstem. We knew she had weeks, maybe a month at most. The immunotherapy was our only option, but the preliminary results from similar cases were devastating. 11 children died from the treatment itself. The 12th survived but suffered massive organ failure. She's been in a vegetative state ever since." Dr. Chen's voice was barely above a whisper. "We had to decide whether to tell you that your daughter had no hope at all, or to give you something to fight for in her final weeks." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. So when Henderson canceled the treatment, he may have actually spared Rosalie weeks of additional suffering. The treatment would have required her to be in intensive care, hooked to machines, in considerable pain. Instead, she was able to spend her final weeks at home with you, comfortable and surrounded by love. Tears were streaming down my face, but I wasn't sure if they were from grief, anger, or relief. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Because we've seen what complete hopelessness does to families. Parents who give up entirely, who stop fighting, who can't be present for their children because they're consumed by despair. We thought it was kinder to let you believe there was still a chance." I pulled Henderson's letter from my purse and set it on her desk. "So he was trying to protect me." Dr. Chen picked up the letter, scanning it quickly. "I can't speak to Henderson's motives for his other actions, but yes, his decision about the immunotherapy may have been an attempt to shield you from devastating news." He made me promise not to tell you the real statistics. He said he would rather you hate him than lose all hope. The irony was crushing. In trying to expose Henderson as a monster who had killed our daughter for money, I had discovered that his most seemingly heinous act might have actually been a misguided attempt at love. Does this change anything? Doctor, Chen asked gently, about your feelings toward Henderson? I considered the question carefully. No, I said finally. It doesn't change the fact that he stole from families with sick children. It doesn't change the fact that he planned to have me institutionalized. It doesn't change the fact that he was having an affair while our daughter was dying. And it doesn't change the fact that he made this decision without consulting me. I stood up, folding the letter and putting it back in my purse. But it does help me understand that people can do terrible things and loving things simultaneously. Henderson was both the man who protected me from devastating news and the man who planned to destroy my life for his own convenience. As I walked to the door, Dr. Chen called after me. Abigail, for what it's worth, you gave Rosalie exactly what she needed in her final weeks. You were present, loving, and hopeful. That matters more than any treatment ever could have. Outside, in my car, I sat in the parking lot for a long time, processing what I had learned. Henderson was still a criminal who deserved his prison sentence. But he was also a broken man who had tried, in his own deeply flawed way, to carry an unbearable burden alone. The truth, I realized, was rarely as simple as we need it to be. 6 months after Henderson's sentencing, I made the decision to visit him in prison. Not for closure, not for forgiveness, but because I needed to look him in the eye and tell him that I finally understood the full truth, and that it changed nothing about the justice he deserved. The Federal Correctional Facility was a 3-hour drive from home. Alice had offered to come with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. The visiting room was stark and depressing, filled with plastic chairs and the quiet desperation of families trying to maintain connections through reinforced glass. Henderson looked smaller than I remembered, gray at the temples and thinner than he'd been even at sentencing. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. Abigail, I can't believe you came. I sat across from him, separated by the partition, and picked up the phone. I spoke with Dr. Chen. Henderson's face immediately changed, understanding exactly why I was there. So you know, he said quietly, I know that the immunotherapy would probably have failed. I know that you were protecting me from devastating news. And I know that Rosalie was going to die regardless of your decision. Henderson let out a shaky breath. Does that change anything? I looked at him steadily. It changes my understanding of that specific decision. But Henderson, understanding your motives doesn't excuse your actions. You still stole from families with dying children. You still planned to have me institutionalized. You still chose to handle Rosalie's medical crisis by having an affair and planning your escape. Henderson nodded slowly. I know. I've had months to think about all of this, and I know that one moment of trying to protect you doesn't undo all the damage I caused. The difference, I continued, is that now I can see you as a complicated person who made terrible choices, rather than a monster who felt nothing. That matters for my own healing, but it doesn't change the fact that you destroyed dozens of families' trust and stole money meant to save children's lives. I think about those families every day, Henderson said. The Torres family, the Johnsons, all of them. I know that saying I'm sorry doesn't give them back what I took. No, it doesn't. But here's what I need you to understand, Henderson. I'm not here to forgive you or to tell you that your sentence was too harsh. I'm here because I've learned something important over these past months. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I've learned that I can hold two truths simultaneously. You were a husband who tried to protect me from unbearable knowledge. And you were also a criminal who preyed on vulnerable families. You loved Rosalie enough to spare her additional suffering, and you also plan to profit from her death. Both things can be true. Henderson was crying now, but I felt no urge to comfort him. The reason I can live with this complexity is because I've found something more important than revenge or hatred. I've found purpose. What do you mean? I'm starting a foundation, not just to help families with medical bills, but to provide oversight and protection for vulnerable parents dealing with medical crises. I want to make sure no one can ever prey on desperate families the way you did. Henderson's eyes widened. You're going to help people like the families I hurt. I'm going to help people avoid becoming victims in the first place. I'm going to use what I learned from exposing your crimes to create systems that protect families when they're most vulnerable. I stood up, preparing to leave. Henderson, you'll spend the next 25 years in prison, and you should. But I'm going to spend those same years building something positive from the destruction you caused. That's the difference between us. As I walked toward the exit, Henderson called my name through the glass. I turned back one final time. Abigail, I hope you find peace. I already have, I replied. Not through forgiving you, but through choosing to build something better than the pain you created. The drive home felt lighter than the drive there. I had faced the complexity of Henderson's actions and my own feelings without losing sight of what mattered. Justice had been served, and I had the power to create something meaningful from the wreckage. Henderson would spend his remaining years paying for his crimes, but I would spend mine ensuring that other families never had to endure what we had gone through. That, I realized, was the truest form of victory. 1 year after Henderson's sentencing, I stood in the conference room of the newly established Rosalie's Shield Foundation, looking out at a room full of people who had become my extended family. Sarah and Michael Torres sat at the table alongside Nathan, Miles, and Dr. Chen, who had agreed to serve as our medical advisor. Agent Williams had joined our board as well, bringing her expertise in financial crimes to help us develop protective protocols. The foundation has already helped 43 families in our first year of operation, I reported to the gathered board members. We've recovered over $200,000 in stolen funds from various financial predators, and we've implemented oversight systems at 12 major hospitals to prevent medical billing fraud. Sarah Torres raised her hand. Abigail, I wanted to update everyone on Diego's progress. Thanks to the recovered funds from Henderson's restitution, we were able to get him the physical therapy he needed. He's walking again, and his doctors say his prognosis is excellent. The room filled with quiet applause. These small victories felt more meaningful than any revenge I could have taken against Henderson. Dr. Chen spoke next. I've been working with the Medical Ethics Committee to develop new protocols for communicating with families during terminal diagnoses. We're implementing a system where families are given complete information about treatment options, including statistical probabilities, but with proper psychological support to help them process difficult news. I nodded, thinking about how different Rosalie's final weeks might have been if we had implemented these systems earlier. That's exactly the kind of change we hope to create. Miles, who had become our chief investigator, opened a thick file. We've identified 17 other individuals running schemes similar to Henderson's across 3 states. Local law enforcement and the FBI are building cases against them now. The model Henderson used, targeting families with sick children, through financial advisory services, appears to be more common than we initially realized. The scope of the problem was staggering, but it also confirmed that our work was necessary. Every predator we exposed meant dozens of families who would be protected from financial exploitation during their most vulnerable moments. After the meeting, I walked through our offices, a modest space downtown that we had furnished with donations and volunteer labor. The walls were covered with thank you letters from families we had helped, photos of children whose medical care had been protected from fraud, and newspaper articles about financial predators who had been caught through our investigative work. In my private office, I kept 3 items on my desk: A photo of Rosalie laughing on her 8th birthday, a copy of Henderson's final letter to me, and a letter from the Department of Justice commending our foundation's work in preventing medical, financial fraud. These 3 items represented the complexity of my journey: love, betrayal, and transformation all existing in the same space. My phone rang. It was Jessica Chen from the local news station. "Abigail, I wanted to let you know that the story we did about Rosalie's Shield Foundation has been picked up nationally. Good Morning America wants to interview you about the foundation's work and how you transformed your personal tragedy into a force for protecting other families." I considered the request. A year ago, I had avoided all media attention, wanting only to grieve privately and seek justice. Now, I understood that sharing our story could help prevent other families from experiencing what we had gone through. "I'll do it," I said, "but I want to make sure the focus is on the foundation's work and the families we're protecting, not on my personal story with Henderson." "Absolutely. They're particularly interested in how you've created systems to prevent financial predators from targeting families with sick children." After hanging up, I opened Henderson's letter one more time. I had read it dozens of times over the past year, each reading helping me understand a little more about the complexity of human nature and the possibility of finding meaning in even the darkest experiences. Henderson's crimes had been real and devastating, but they had also led me to discover a strength I never knew I possessed and a purpose that gave my life new meaning. Rosalie's death had been tragic and senseless, but her memory was now protecting other children and families from exploitation. I folded the letter and put it back in my desk drawer. Henderson would spend the next 24 years in prison, but I would spend them building something that honored Rosalie's memory while protecting vulnerable families. That evening, I visited Rosalie's grave for the first time in months. The sigh. Headstone was simple but beautiful, engraved with her dates and the words, "Beloved daughter, whose memory protects others." "Hi, sweetheart," I said, placing fresh flowers by her headstone. "I wanted to tell you about all the families we've helped this year. I think you would be proud of what we're building in your name." The sunset painted the cemetery in golden light, and for the first time since Rosalie's death, I felt genuinely at peace. Henderson's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also taught me that even the worst experiences could be transformed into something meaningful. I was no longer just a grieving mother seeking justice. I was a woman who had found her purpose in protecting others from the kind of pain I had endured. 2 years after that devastating day when I discovered Henderson's location at a luxury spa during our daughter's funeral, I stood on the stage at the National Conference on Medical Ethics, addressing an audience of doctors, social workers, and family advocates from across the country. When I first opened that location tracking app and saw where my husband really was, I began. I thought my story was about betrayal and revenge. I thought it was about a man who chose luxury and selfishness over his dying daughter and grieving wife. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. What I learned over the next 2 years is that my story was actually about something much more powerful: the transformation that's possible when we choose to build rather than destroy, when we choose purpose over bitterness. I clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from Rosalie's Shield Foundation. In 2 years, our foundation has protected over 200 families from financial predators. We've helped law enforcement arrest 23 individuals running schemes similar to my husband's. We've recovered nearly $800,000 in stolen medical funds, and we've implemented protective protocols at over 50 hospitals nationwide. The applause was warm and sustained, but the numbers don't tell the whole story. The real victory is in the faces of children who received the medical care they needed because no one stole their treatment money. It's in the parents who can focus on healing instead of worrying about financial exploitation. It's in the knowledge that Rosalie's death, as tragic as it was, has prevented other families from experiencing what we went through. I paused, looking out at the audience. Henderson Matthews is serving a 25-year sentence in federal prison, and he should be. Justice was important. But justice alone wouldn't have honored my daughter's memory or transformed our pain into something meaningful. I clicked to a final slide, a photo of Rosalie laughing in our backyard, the same photo that sat on my desk at the foundation. My daughter Rosalie died at 8 years old, but her legacy is protecting families across the country. Her memory has become a shield that stands between vulnerable families and those who would exploit their desperation. As I left the stage to a standing ovation, I felt a profound sense of completion. Henderson's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also revealed a strength I never knew I possessed. His location tracker had exposed his lies, but it had also led me to discover my truth. I was no longer the broken woman who had sat alone at her daughter's funeral, abandoned and betrayed. I was someone who had transformed the worst experience of her life into a force for protecting others. Rosalie's light hadn't been extinguished by her death or dimmed by her father's betrayal. Instead, it had become a beacon that guided other families away from the darkness that had nearly consumed us. That was the real story. That was the true victory. And that was how love ultimately triumphs over even the deepest betrayal. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.